there's this sort of wishful thinking that, and this is, I'm probably gonna, I sort of mentioned on the last episode, but like, what is the thing to do with Intel? And there's a bit about having some sort of national champion or Manhattan type project around AI that can incorporate this. And the main thing that gives me pause is something that needs to be grappled with every advocate of industrial policy or Buy American, is you need incentives to actually do a good job. You're dealing with incredibly difficult stuff. And again, I would go back to the car industry. The car industry, Detroit produced horrible automobiles. That's why they lost. And any sort of, like, if we had put 100% tariffs on Japanese automakers, the net result would have been Americans stuck with crappy cars with terrible gas mileage that broke down all the time. Like, the Japanese won for a reason. And so this is a bit where the U.S. policy, by and large, always goes in the consumer's favor. Globalization is heavily pro-consumer. The U.S. sort of consumer wins. And by the way, the U.S. economy wins, because what we do is we end up funneling, to go back to the previous question, all our best talent flows to these areas that we can do uniquely well, which then ultimately has all this leverage over the world. So, and this is what makes this discussion really hard. Like, there's a real fundamental tension between this national security imperative, this idea of self-sufficiency, and the fact that the system we have works pretty darn well. And the number one winner of that system is the American consumer. And for all the angst about blue collar work and factory jobs, the American worker. Like, the poorest state in the union has higher GDP than like most European countries. Like, is the favorite talking point on Twitter. It's true. Like we make a lot of money, we spend a lot of money, and people in the U.S. are really rich. And even if it doesn't feel like that, social media makes it all feel worse because you see like true wealth all over the place. But the on the ground reality, not when you're going to a tourist area of a big European city, but you're out in the countryside, and they are depressing. There's concrete blocks of housing, right? And little cars, and
no air conditioning, no ice. When you
that's
go out
no
to
ice.
cafes.
I mean, yeah, I've become a no ice guy. I hate to admit, but yeah,
God, you've been gone for far too long.
I know,
a no
it's
ice
bad.
guy out there in
It's bad.
Taipei. Well, the other question I have about an AI Manhattan project is, can the government afford to hire people that are good enough to make something like that work? I mean, you go back to the actual Manhattan Project.
Right. What was the alternative?
All of the brightest minds in the entire world working on that, including some people who weren't necessarily American to begin with. How do you pull together that sort of talent when the private market, as we said earlier, can afford to pay people whatever they want and have the best people working at like OpenAI or Google or whatever? That piece of the logistics is, a little fuzzy to me in terms of how we actually execute on a project.
No, it's really fuzzy. Like, the problem is with all this sort of stuff, when you drill into the details, that's why my pessimistic view on this is the system only gets reformed if there's a major war. Like, that's that, like, because that just the incentives don't line up otherwise. Like, you have to like physically break the alternatives, like they can bomb to smithereens. Then you rebuild with maybe different considerations in mind.
Okay, let's get our act together on the Manhattan Project. Manhattan Project Part 2.